All right, folks, welcome to Onshape Live 2023. We're excited today to talk to you about improving supply chain collaboration using Arena PLM. And so we'll walk you through a live demonstration of connecting Onshape with Arena to enable that supply chain communication. My name is George Lewis. I'm Vice President of Business Development and Strategy for Arena and Onshape. And I'm joined today by Graham Birch, VP of Product Management. And so Graham will be stepping in for a live demo here shortly. And so we're short on time today, but I'm excited to walk you through a few slides to lead up to a live demonstration of how we can use these two solutions together to be more to communicate more effectively. And so, if product development had an arch enemy, I would say it's exactly that. It's bad communication is really what the challenge there is, and this applies to engineering teams. This applies to your entire enterprise, but it goes well beyond that into the extended enterprise as well. And so what you see here is what many environments look like as an organization begins to grow. You may have launched a single product, but as you get into multiple product launches, there's many different departments inside the organization. It becomes difficult to communicate across the organization. By the way, this even includes the extended enterprise. And so when you think about suppliers, contract manufacturers, or even partners, we need to pull them into this mess as well. And so Onshape, in and of itself, helps with many of these problems alone, right? So in the engineering side of things, hey, I need to find the latest version of the document that I'm working on. Somebody overwrote my data, or somebody didn't check in data when they should have, and now the information is a little bit out of date. There may be inefficiencies associated, and it can be difficult to communicate with folks, especially when you have employees that might be remote. And so Onshape helps solve these problems all by itself. Now, when you're ready to take that to another level, Arena can help solve the challenges that can occur once you move out of the engineering department and need to pull in others from inside your organization or outside your organization. And so think of situations like, hey, an engineering change order, didn't get processed in time, and somebody placed an order for 10,000 parts, right? Something along those lines, or scrap and rework at the contract manufacturer because they had the wrong build package. They pulled up an old email and worked off outdated information. Or a supplier is down because you don't have the latest SOP or work instructions associated with the overall design to really keep them on board. And these challenges, I mean, they're all over the place, right? So there's interruptions and disruptions. How do I communicate through all of this? Communication is not just verbal communication, it's also the bill of materials, it's the drawings, it's the SOPs, all those sorts of things that go along with it. And you end up in situations where you have lost profit, delays in manufacturing. You might not make your launch window to launch a product before a holiday season, for example. And then you also potentially have risk associated as well. And really, by connecting Onshape and Arena, we're talking about reducing risk in the organization such that you have a cloud native product development environment that connects on the left hand side here, your design tools. Today we're focused on Onshape and we'll talk about the connection primarily, but there could be other design tools in your organization as well. Think printed circuit board design, or there may be a software development team that goes with the product or in the cloud associated to the product. That's going to connect to Arena to control all the product information to help disseminate it throughout the organization and process those more formal workflows like an engineering change order, for example, or a quality workflow like a corrective action. And then potentially even connect that over to an ERP system on the right, which we're not going to focus on today, but Arena does provide connectivity to most all of the modern ERP systems available in the marketplace today. And so what we're talking about here is really cloud native design. And so we're talking about all your information tools are in the cloud. All you need is a web browser to get access to this information. Both your early on design and version control done in Onshape, communication around that information also done in Onshape, but also as you formalize the design, you want to release that over to Arena, and so you're going to push things like the bill of materials, which we'll see today, revision control, change management, all these things. The beauty is I can spin up a new employee pretty much instantaneously because all I really need is a web browser. Doesn't really matter what platform you're on, and you instantly enable parallel collaboration. Users can work more quickly. Cost savings can be substantial by virtue of the fact that, hey, look, I don't have to have fancy hardware in order to run a CAD application. It can be done in my browser. And all this helps ensure product quality by providing connectivity to the supply chain in the earliest stages of product development. And that's what our demonstration today is going to focus on, is the idea that from Onshape early on in design, I can pull my suppliers in and ask for feedback early on. So I get better DFM feedback. And so with that, let's start the live demonstration. I'm going to pass controls over to Graham to walk us through the Onshape part of the demo.
Thank you, George. So we all know that once you've created a great design in Onshape, actually realizing that design involves a lot more people. So let's just quickly walk through some of the steps that we'll go through, and most of these steps we'll show you in the demonstration. So the first thing we'll do is synchronize my Onshape design to Arena PLM. Now, as soon as I do that, what that does is it means that the rest of the organization can get involved. You know, these are people who they're not designers, they don't have access to Onshape maybe, but they're working every day in Arena. So now these people can jump on board. They can find out. Let's look for all of the off-the-shelf parts. And seeing as today is really focused on how does Arena help with supply chain, let's focus on what's happening in the supply chain aspects. So we can find the off-the-shelf parts, we can find suppliers for those parts, and we can allocate supplier part numbers for those off-the-shelf standard components. Next up, there are things which are made to spec. So we'll show you here how it's easy to go ahead and create an association between a made to spec part and in this case maybe a contract manufacturer that's going to manufacture that for us. After that, you can add cost information, and there may be some difference in costing between small volume for things like like a prototype run. There may be a difference in cost between prototype and maybe an initial production run versus full production. Eventually, we'll get all the information that we need, and the bill of material will be released, and then we can send out information to further into the supply chain. We can send out data packages, or even better, we can invite the suppliers to come directly into Arena and pick the information directly out of Arena. So throughout the course of the demonstration, either between myself or George, we'll touch on most of these aspects of what it takes to realize the product once the product has been designed. So let's start in Onshape, and let's say that I'm an engineer. I'm working on the design of a throttle for the automotive industry. I pretty much think I'm happy with this. I'm just going to finish off the design, and maybe first of all, I'm going to assign a material to this. The reason for assigning the material is that will become apparent in a little while. But let's say it's going to be aluminium 1060. And next, I'm going to pull up the Onshape properties dialog. Now, all of the interaction that happens between Onshape and Arena for parts happens through the properties dialog. And so the first thing I want to do here is pick a category. So I'm going to say this is a casting. Now, in this case, you're all familiar with Onshape categories, but in this case, that category is actually synchronized to Arena. Now, the benefit of that is now we have a single data dictionary for categories. And as you know, with categories come custom properties. So we have that single definition of what constitutes a category and a custom property. But in addition to that, what it does allow me to do is I can grab a part number, but in this case, instead of grabbing it from Onshape, we can take that part number directly out of Arena. And I'm just going to do one more thing, seeing as we are talking about supply chain. I'm going to say that this part here, this is not an off-the-shelf part. This is going to be a made-to-spec part. So we'll just apply those changes. Now, once I've done that, you'll notice that this little icon appears up here. This is the Arena product icon, and this, when I hover over, you can see that says sync to Arena. So if I click that, this will synchronize my part to Arena, and it says it's synchronized successfully. I've even got within Onshape a little connector here, which allows me to jump directly from this part across to Arena. And here we have our freshly minted throttle body. As you can see, everything came across: the casting, the item number, the item name, the item description. And remember, we set the material. So even things like the material come across, and in this case, the calculated mass for the part comes across. Up in the top, you can see that we have a little thumbnail. That just gives people a sense of what this part is, and we'll come back and talk more about thumbnails in a moment, because that's especially powerful when you see that in the context of an illustrated bill of material. Down in the right-hand corner here, you can see we've got a rather larger thumbnail, but in this case, as I hover over it, you'll see that the mouse turns into a pointer, which means I can click it and something's going to happen. And in this case, you can see that what we get here is a 3D thumbnail, which you can rotate, spin, pan, zoom. So let's assume that in this case, now I'm playing the role of somebody in supply chain. And so my objective here is to assign a supplier, someone who's going to manufacture this throttle body for me. So I'll go into costing and say I want to create a new supplier relationship. So I'm going to go look for my supplier. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because George is actually going to dig into this in a little more detail throughout his demonstration. So we'll select that supplier. We'll just go ahead with a custom-made part number, and that's it. So now you can see within the information page for this machine throttle body, we've now completed some of the activity in the sourcing tab, and I've assigned a supplier. So let me kind of switch hats for a moment and be the supplier. So here I want to go ahead and find that. Now, in reality, what would have happened is if this was a real world business, the supplier would have received an email with a link. Here I'm just doing a quick search. And here I can see the same kind of information. So now I'm a let's say a trusted supplier. I have been granted supplier access into the Arena instance, this particular workspace. So I can come in and pick the information that I need, and I can see the same information. I see the thumbnails, I see the metadata, I see the mass, the material, and so on. I can also click on the 3D thumbnail, and I can spin, pan, zoom to get a better feel of it. But in all honesty, if I'm a supplier, looking at a 3D thumbnail is kind of interesting, but it's insufficient. And so what I would really like to do is to be able to open this directly in Onshape so that I can get access to higher quality information. So that's the purpose of this little badge up here. So this is indicating, like, number one, that this item was created in Onshape. And then secondly, I can click that and it will open this part in Onshape for me. Now, not surprisingly, in this case, I'm a supplier. So you'll notice that my Onshape user interface is a little different. This is the Onshape Lite user interface. So although I can interact with the model, I don't have the rights to change it. So I'm going to jump straight away to look at the casting. And maybe one thing that concerns me is the radius on this fillet, let's say. So maybe I'd like to consider having that changed. So I'm going to add a comment in here and just say, change that fillet to 3 millimeters to reduce casting cost. There we go. So I've made a suggestion. But maybe I work with this vendor quite a lot, and I've got a high confidence that we're going to win this business. And one of the things that I would like to do is get a head start on planning my manufacturing processes. So maybe I'd like to grab a step file. Right? So now, because I am I'm a supplier, I've got access to Onshape through Arena. I can download myself a step file and get started on my manufacturing process. So let's jump back and go back to our engineer. And what we notice is, of course, if you're familiar with Onshape and Onshape comments, I can see that we have a comment. And the suggestion is to change the fillet to 3 millimeters. And because the commenting is done directly in Onshape, I don't have to guess which fillet needs to be changed. I can go straight in there. So let's just change that. And let's make this guy 3 millimeters. So that's all good. We're happy with that. I can check that comment and say that the comment's been incorporated. So looks like we're good to go with this. Just one last thing before we continue. I'm going to snap a version at this point, and that gives us a milestone at which both myself and my supplier have agreed. Now, obviously, this single part is really part of a larger assembly, and so here is the full assembly. If we pull out the bill of material, we can see that we're missing a few part numbers, and because the throttle is in a different document, that doesn't yet have a part number. So I just want to update this to the latest. So that's now pulling in our version 7. And we should be ready to go. And you can see that that's pulled in the part number that we allocated when we were working in the throttle body. So now we're going to head and just generate part numbers for all the other parts in the bill of material. Now, again, all of those part numbers just came from Arena. The other thing that we're showing here in the bill of material is I'm indicating which of these parts are made to spec versus off the shelf. Now I've got this assembly ready to go. I can do one button click and I can sync this entire bill of material across to my Arena workspace. So what it's doing in the background is it's creating Arena items for every part and assembly in the assembly. And when it's finished, we'll be able to click, one click, and open that bill of material in Arena. I'm going to switch my view of the bill of material to the custom view, and then here's what I mean by the thumbnails. You can see how easy it is to navigate this bill of material. Now we've got pictures of the parts and assemblies. So I'm going to pause right there, and I just want to show you one more thing before I hand back to George, and that is, how do we configure Onshape to talk to our Arena workspace? And it's very easy. From an Onshape Enterprise Admin page, there's a new link down here, Arena, and in here we just have to provide a few pieces of information. That is the workspace ID of the Arena workspace that we're connecting to, and a web token. This is something which is provided by Arena, and this is the way that Onshape can communicate securely between Onshape and Arena. It's kind of like a secret key, if you would. And then the last thing is we just give a location of the Arena server. We hit save, and we are connected. So I'm going to pause right there, and I'm going to hand back to George.
Excellent. Thanks, Graham. All right, so I'm going to take things to the next level using Arena and do two things today. Graham showed you some basic interaction, but first I want to establish a relationship with an off-the-shelf part supplier. And second, I'm going to create a relationship with a made-to-spec component supplier to ask them for feedback from within Arena. And so I'm a supply chain manager. Here's the assembly that we were just taking a look at. And from here, we can go into the details and see some of what Graham just showed you. But there's a whole variety of different pieces of information that I could potentially pull up. First, you'll note we actually have an indented bill of material here. You can drill into the bill as needed to get more detail. There are other views of a bill of material available. We're not going to get into all of these today, but over time, you want to see a red line view of a bill of material as it changes over time. These are some of the things that you can do. Now, in our first example here, this fuel injector down at the bottom is an off-the-shelf component, and I want to find a supplier for it. Now, I may have somebody in mind straight away, but from here we can go in, see some of the details about it. These pages are configurable, by the way. You can take a look at it. As Graham showed you previously, we've got visualization built in to Arena here, so anybody can take a look, or if we needed to pop into Onshape to have a closer look, we could also do that from here. But what I want to do is say, hey, this is a fuel injector. Let's go look for a supplier inside Arena that could supply this for us. And so the first place I want to go is let's look at a list of all our approved manufacturers inside PLM. Here they are. We have 64 in this example, and this is a demo data set. You probably have hundreds, if not 1,000 different suppliers. How do I find the right supplier in this example? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and say, well, I just want to go in and look where the description contains injector. And we've got one result here. It's showing the single result that came up. And we can see right here, Beck Arnley is a supplier of vehicle electronic components, including fuel injectors, sensors, and actuators. Okay, this looks like it could be a good option for me. I can go in, maybe take a look at their website if that's what I needed to do, get a little bit more detail about what it is they can do for me. And then from here, other things that I could potentially take a look at would be resources or individuals that we know there. So Roger Winward is our project manager. Here's the contact information for him. Do we have any supporting documentation? This could be information like supplier scorecards that you may have for your business, or it could even be information about the business itself. So supporting information like even like a data sheet. You'll also notice up here at the top, I can see other workflows associated with the supplier. And so in this case, I can see that this particular supplier had an open quality process open against them. Let's take a look at that to make sure we think these folks are the right supplier in this example. And so this is part of a quality workflow, a supplier corrective action, where we can go in and potentially even review some of the details here to see exactly what was going on with this supplier and what the investigation was that we had to do. Net, there was no O-rings included in the batch of the injectors. They were supposed to be shipped with O-rings. And if we scroll down here to the bottom, we can see that the comments, the supplier acted quickly to resolve issues, setting status back to approved. So, okay, I mean, this supplier looks like it could be a good choice. The other thing we can also do here, if we go back to look at that fuel injector, would be to establish them as a source. And so, like Graham showed you previously, we can go in here and say, let's add Beck. We're going to buy directly from them. Eventually, we're going to buy in enough volume that we'll need to do that. You can also specify third-party vendors if you need to. So if you were buying it from AutoZone or something like that, you could do that. And now it's asking me, okay, do you want to use a custom made part? No, that's not what I'm after. An existing part number, or create a brand new part number. And so in this case, let's take a look to see what we have that already comes from Beck. And so here we can see we have these individual parts already in our system. And here's the supplier part number associated with it. The standard flow injector should be sufficient for what I'm looking to accomplish for this particular design, but we do have some alternatives there. And now we can go in and provide a little bit more detail on the source relationship. Note here things like ranking. As your business grows, you may want to rank your sources so you have two or three of them, but you have an order of preference, or even a split percentage. To reduce risk early in design, I can say, hey, I want to split 50-50 between two different suppliers, and then eventually pass that information off to accounting or an ERP type solution. And so now what we've done is establish that relationship with Beck Arnley's part number here. But what we'll see here, if we take a closer look at sourcing, is we can also go in here and see, oh, we already have some quotes that came from Beck Arnley. And so these were actually entered in Arena PLM at some point in the past. Somebody was probably using that part number for a different design. And we can go in here and say, well, what kind of quantity do we need for prototype? Well, 1 to 5. And then you can also select a production quantity there and say set active costs. Those costs then get activated in the bill of material, where they can be rolled up in a bill of material view for costing. And so we're not going to go and source everything in the bill of material right now, but that gives you a little bit of a feel for how engineering can interact with supply chain or a procurement individual inside PLM to begin to look for a source for this off-the-shelf component. Now, the other example that Graham also talked about a little bit would be around, hey, I need a help from a made-to-spec manufacturer, so like a sheet metal supplier. And so if we take a look here in Arena, we can navigate the product data using the where used report here. We can see the next level up is the throttle assembly. We can also see the top level down here at the bottom. If it rolled up even higher to a motorcycle or something like that, we would see that down here at the bottom. We can work our way back to the bill of material using Arena's knowledge of the product bill of material, which came from Onshape. And then back here at the bill of material view, scrolling down, the assembly you see here, this quadrant, may very well be something that I want to get feedback from a supplier on. Because there's a sheet metal component to that assembly that actually needs to get made. I can't go buy this thing off the shelf anywhere. And so here's where we might go in and identify a source. In this case, I've entered them already in the interest of time, but MSM sheet metal manufacturing, here's their part number associated with it. Again, we could have costing information coming from them. But what I've done here is actually add them and given them supplier access to Arena. And so we can see here they have read write contract manufacturer access. The beauty of this is we're not publishing things to a different website. We're actually inviting the supplier into the same PLM environment that I'm in as an employee, but they have limited access to the information. And so, for example, I can share out a bill of materials and they get to see the entire bill. Or it could be a situation where I say, hey, it's just the one component that I want them to see because they're machining a part for me or it's an injection molded part. I only want them to see that one. But you can selectively turn it on and turn it off here to decide what, if anything, should the supplier see. And so with that, let's switch over here to a different web browser and we'll log in as the supplier. And I'll show you a little bit more of the detail on what things would look like from their perspective. Okay, so we've logged in as the supplier. A couple things to point out here. This is their dashboard. This is the page they land on when they log in. They will get emails about things that have been shared with them, other workflows as well. We're not going to focus on it today, but here you see an example of here's an ECO that this particular supplier is involved in. So not only is it product data, but I can have workflows defined and actually include the suppliers in those overall workflows. So as your business matures and you really need to pull them into your own environment, you can do that here as well. Now, here's the quadrant that we were just taking a look at. And from a supplier perspective, a couple things to point out. Number one, it's the same information. So I haven't published it or attached it to an email. It's not a copy of the data, it is the data. If I revoke access, you know, 10 minutes ago, they're not going to have access anymore instantaneously. But as a supplier, I can go in and take a look at it. They may have access to the bill of material. As a contract manufacturer, they can see some of the things here. Looks like I haven't turned on all the components here. Items are hidden. You actually have control over that. But you also notice some of these tabs here across the top are grayed out, and that's by virtue of them being a supplier with supplier access. They cannot see everything that an employee might be able to see. And so think of it this way: an employee generally gets to see everything, a supplier generally gets to see nothing unless you actually turn it on and say, yes, I want them to see this information or I want them to see this bill of material. But then from here, they can actually drill in and get more information on it as well. Same things that we saw earlier in the demonstration. They can take a look at the visualization capabilities here to take a closer peek at it. And then, should they have the desire, they can also pop into Onshape as well, which Graham has already demonstrated, but they could potentially provide you DFM feedback at that point in time. And that's really the benefit of using this solution is getting that feedback earlier in design. I'm preaching to the choir here, but if you get feedback on how to optimize your design earlier, it's an awful lot cheaper to do it. And you're also going to prevent issues like, you know, a line being down because the manufacturability or prototype had an issue because, you know, one of the radius was too tight to bend on the mandrel or something like that. And so that concludes the live demo piece. A little bit more on Arena. If you're not familiar with Arena, Arena has around 1,300 customers that are all over the globe. This is a cloud native product development solution. And so you'll see people logging in from everywhere. 66% of our customers actually use this tool with their supply chain to interact with them. Some of the organizations that use it, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but just to say that, hey, look, there's lots of companies just like you all that use this solution. You know, great examples are out there. Legrand does your light switches in your home for smart home automation. You know, in the way of connected home systems, you've got organizations like Sonos doing smart home speakers, you know, using this particular product. SunPower for solar power generation, and then life sciences organizations as well. And so for oncology, you've got companies like ViewRay here doing large devices that use MRIs to target tumors and then treat them with radiation all at the same time. And so really impressive organizations using this. From the standpoint of more information, if you want to hear more, I mean, we covered everything at a very, very high level today and really focused only on supply chain. Here's more information available to you. These QR codes, if you want to point your phone up there real quick, they'll take you to the Arena website where there's a blog, case studies, links to lots of videos and webinars. And on the Onshape side, this is a specific QR code that will take you to information about the connection itself. And so if you're curious about the features that are in it, you know, FAQ, if you want to get a demonstration, all those things are built in there as well. There's actually another release of this connector coming up. But the beauty is it's all cloud native. So you're not installing anything. We're maintaining all of this on your behalf. And so as we update Arena and update Onshape, the connection is always going to be quality checked and good to go. So you don't have to worry about it. That's the beauty of it. So last slide before Q&A, I want to invite you all to the PTC LiveWorks happening May 15th to May 18th. The conference is a great way for you to connect with over 6,000 product development, engineering, and manufacturing professionals and leaders. We have a huge exhibit area solely devoted to Onshape. You'll get a chance to meet the people who develop Onshape and network with other Onshape users. Plus, there'll be 15 in-depth breakout sessions and 27 live training sessions where you can sharpen your Onshape skills. You'll also get a chance to learn about other technologies here at PTC, including Arena PLM, which we talked about today, augmented reality, IoT, Internet of Things, service management across over 250 different breakout sessions and 180 demonstrations. As a special promotion, the first 100 live Onshape Live attendees who register for LiveWorks 23 will receive complimentary 4-day passes. That's pretty awesome. Just visit liveworks.com/register and enter the code Onshape Live. The special offer expires April 14th, so take advantage today. And with that, we've made it to the question and answer period. So let's take a look at the queue and see what's come in.
Hey, George, this is Matt Rohr. I'm moderating the event for those of you watching. So a couple of questions from the audience. Number one, are there any customers currently using this?
Absolutely. Yeah, the initial release went live last year, September timeframe. There's many organizations that are live on the connector today.
Great. Another question is for you, George. Does Arena connect to ERP systems like SAP?
Absolutely. SAP, Oracle would be the two big ones that you hear folks connecting to, but it's also not uncommon to connect to products like NetSuite for cloud ERP, Acumatica for cloud ERP, or even the Microsoft Dynamics products.
Great. Does the supplier need to have an Onshape account to be able to view this data?
It depends upon how they're interacting. And so if they need to get to the Onshape model, they will need light access. And Graham, you can jump in here to provide more feedback. I believe there's other things you can do, but from the Arena side, they can get to visualization without that.
Yeah, you're right, George. I think you said that rather well. They can view the 3D thumbnail in Arena, but if they click on an Onshape link and try and access the Onshape application, then they do need an Onshape license for that. And in the case of the supplier, more often than not, people are giving a light license to a supplier. But if you really trust them, you could give them an edit access as well. All of that obviously is controlled by the usual Onshape sharing permissions. Right? So you have full control of who sees what and what permissions they get.
Does Arena require the use of company-specific part numbers for off-the-shelf items, or can it use the supplier part number?
Do you want me to take that, George?
Please do.
Yeah. So the best practice is that you would have a company part number. And then what Arena allows you to do is to pick one or more suppliers for that part number, and you would match the supplier part numbers to your Arena part number. And the reason for that, your Arena part number, your company part number. And the reason for that, obviously, is that allows you to diversify your supply chain. And let's face it, in this recent supply chain crisis we've had, no one wants to be tied to a single supplier. So this gives you a tremendous amount of flexibility while maintaining the consistency of having company part numbers, but being able to easily map to your supplier part numbers.
George, maybe you can speak to this, or either one of you. Can a subscription to Arena be trialed for a month or two?
Reach out to the Arena team. There is a trial available. I don't know the time frame on it, but we absolutely run most customers through an Arena trial to let them play around with it. That's one of the great things about being cloud native is we can actually plug you right in. So head to our website if you don't have a resource and chat with the person there, or if you know somebody at Arena, reach out direct.
Great. One more question from the chat. Can Onshape or Arena help ensure that a given supplier is able to produce the requested geometry or do it for a better price than other suppliers in your ecosystem?
That's a really good question. I would say that's exactly what PLM is intended to do, and Graham, I'll let you comment here as well. You certainly may have things like quality workflow set up for identifying what their capabilities are. You may have scorecarding built into PLM to say, hey, what are they capable of and what's their performance been over time, and the quality workflow can inform all of that. And so some of that can be captured in PLM.
Yeah, I would agree with that, George. And part of the kind of information that you're building up in your Arena PLM system is because you mentioned it actually in the demo, right? You're ranking suppliers, and you can say, you know, which ones are preferred. We've used this supplier to build similar things in the past. And then when you couple that with the idea that, you know, you could get feedback from your supplier while the design is still wet, as it were, you know, so that you can get that DFM information back much earlier in the process than you would typically. You know, why wait until the whole thing is signed, sealed, and then just delivered and handed over, when you can have a lot more intimate relationship with that first tier supplier and get, you know, feedback much earlier.
Great, thanks. Here's another question. How do you charge for this connection? Is it server to server license cost, or does each user need a connector license?
The beauty of it is, if you're an Onshape enterprise customer and an Arena customer, you get the connection. Now you have to turn it on. Graham showed that screen there where you enable the connector, but there's no additional fee associated with the connection.
Excellent. Once your enterprise has been connected to Arena, will all Onshape users have the ability to sync to Arena?
Yeah, I can take that. So the ability to sync to Arena is controlled by a global permission in Onshape. So we expect that all Onshape users would have the ability to sync, but if that's something that you want to restrict to you know, a certain group or a project, then you have that capability within Onshape.
Okay. One more from the chat here. Have current users had success in getting their suppliers to adopt this method of quoting and purchasing?
I can take that one. From an Arena perspective, yeah, absolutely. I'll let Graham comment on the Onshape perspective, but most Arena customers are using Arena for supply chain interaction. And so it's either the cost and quote, or it's the, you know, made to spec part interaction for DFM feedback.
Okay. I have a question here, but I'm unclear on, but let's see if you guys have an answer. Is Onshape capable of syncing with management tools that suppliers may use in their process? I'm not sure what management tools the asker is requesting.
Maybe that's something that the submitter of the question could
Yeah,
reach out to us after the event. Be happy to chat. Yeah.
Okay, I think we're just about out of time, but I would say anyone that has questions that we didn't answer, we will respond to you and reach out to you after the event.
Excellent. Well, on behalf of all of Onshape and PTC, I'd like to thank you all for your time. It was a fun session today. Glad we had the opportunity to chat with you all. And if you have any questions, head over to onshape.com or reach out to your Onshape representative and let them know we can get in touch with you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. And thank you, George.
Thanks, Graham.